I will start with the first question. At the end of April, the European Parliament approved the report on a common definition of rape based on the principle of only yes means yes.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you what are the main aspects of this text and whether you think this is a great achievement for the European Parliament.
Well, definitely it's a great achievement for the European Parliament, even though it's a report which we use to put pressure on the Commission. It is an important signal that was sent from the Parliament. I already back in 2024, the last mandate, started the work together with other colleagues and wanted to have a consent-based EU-wide rape legislation included in the first directive, EU directive on combating violence against women and domestic violence. However, back then there were 3 countries mainly, even though there were some more also, but 3 countries mainly: France, Germany, and Hungary. For me, it's an unholy alliance, because in France there was President Macron. In Germany, there was Minister of Justice Buschmann, who also was liberal as Macron. And then there was Orban, Prime Minister Orban in Hungary, who is an illiberal person. And together, they formed a blocking minority in the council. So they blocked the possibility to include a consent-based EU-wide legislation already back then.
Okay, so you started before and
yes.
But was blocked, and now you hope that will pass in the council as well.
Yeah, well, what we have done is that we rolled up our sleeves and now adopted in the Parliament now this report. So the next step is for the Commission to put forward a legislation. Then when the Commission has put forward a legislation, then the Council, also the Member States, and the Parliament will be involved once again.
And you hope this time France and Germany will be in favor of it, of course.
Well, since 2024, even though we don't think it's so many years, it's 1.5 years, 2 years now, a lot has happened since then. For example, the horrific case of Gisèle Pelicot has happened, but there has also been recognized or big cases in Germany and other countries also, where women have been victim of this kind of heinous violence. And that, I think, has led to more legislators from right to left open up their eyes of the importance. And in France, there was still President Macron when they adopted consent-based legislation in France in autumn last year. It was implemented. And Italy is on the way. So today we have 14 countries who has a consent-based rape legislation, 4 countries who are working on it, 1 country who have a no means no legislation, and then the rest who do not have.
Okay, I think. And can you tell me a bit more about what is this report about, more in detail? What did you approve?
Well, it's quite a comprehensive legislation that makes it clear that only yes should mean yes in sexual relations, and that also refers to offline and online. And the core of the legislation lays on that an absence of no is not automatically a yes. But an absence of yes is, of course, always and should be a no. So, for example, if you want to have a physical interaction or so with a person, then you need to not take for granted that a silence means automatically a yes. And also, we have still many countries in the European Union who have old legislations that are based on that. Rape only occur if you can show that you have, said no, and you have pushed back, you have fought back, and so on. Many people do not dare to fight back, because if you fight back, you might not only be raped, you might be killed. So this understanding of that rape doesn't only embody through bruises or through bleeding and so on is an important step.
And I wanted to ask you also, how serious is this kind of violence? How widespread is this kind of violence in Europe? And if you have a bit of data about how many women have experienced sexual violence in their lives?
Well, every third woman in our union is a victim of some kind of violence, and that includes also sexual violence. And only 0.5% of the rapes in the EU leads to convictions, 0.5%. That means that it amount to impunity. I mean, and if a person knows that, well, I don't need to be careful to ensure that the other person really wants, because I will be met with nothing, I will be met with impunity. Well, then, of course, there is a bigger risk that those who the perpetrators will not think twice. They will go ahead and commit the crime because they will think that, well, their crimes will not be met with any consequences. So, I mean, we have a huge problem in our society, and we also see that more and more women and girls are victims of different kind of sexual violence also on online platforms, since many lives on, or most of us move most of our days, even sometimes, on online platforms and social medias and etc.
Okay. And in the report you also talk about the cross-border dimension of rape, and there are like the right-wing groups that instead they say that this is something that should be regulated at national level. Instead you approve a common definition of rape, and as I said, in the report you talk about the cross-border dimension.
Yeah.
What do you mean by cross-border dimension of rape?
Well, that this is to start with crime that exists in all our member states, that exists offline and online. Of course, it's different offline and online, but it still exists. It's a common problem all over our member states and beyond. And if there is a common problem, then we also need to, of course, address it jointly. And there should not be a woman in, for example, Italy should always know that they will have at least the same protection as any other woman in any other part of the world, or a man who, because in most of the cases the perpetrators are men. The man in, say, my own country, Sweden, should know that his actions will be met with consequences as those other countries also. So wherever you are in our union, you should know that you have protection for those who are victims or possible victims, and those who might commit them should always know, wherever they are in our union, that they need to think twice about this kind of committing this kind of heinous crimes. And
I wanted to ask you if there are any contexts in which the sexual violence is more common. For example, it is more common in certain social classes or in a country more than another, or it's something that it's widespread and it's a problem that you can encounter everywhere?
Well, it's a problem where you can really see everywhere. It doesn't just show up in any classes, any certain classes, or people with a certain background, etc. Or you don't just see it on some part of the society. What is most evident is that women tend to, or the most dangerous place for a woman to be is at home. There is this perception that it's on the streets and squares. But no, it's not only. The most dangerous place for women is to be at home. And in some member states, there is, unfortunately, especially where legislators with a Stone Age mentality still are in power, there is a perception that, for example, rape cannot happen within marriages. but it can. And it's not a family matter. A crime is a crime. If a woman or anyone do not want to be physical with anyone else, it doesn't matter if it is your partner or if it is a person you don't know. A no is a no, only yes is a yes.
As you were saying, only yes means yes. We already talked a bit about it, and I wanted to ask you more in detail. What does it mean in practice? Like how would it work in practice? Like you have to ask for explicit consent. Like the parts involved should ask explicitly every time before. How do you see it like working in practice?
Well, you know, almost half of the member states in the European Union have this kind of consent-based legislation, and that has never been an issue of, because there are some people who wonder, and I understand that they wonder, but if they need a written consent or how explicit must it be? My answer is also always very simple. If you do not know that the person in front of you really want to be physical with you, then you should not have physical interaction with that person. So on almost all of the cases, you always know, is the person aware? I mean, if the person is drunk and you should very drunk and cannot even, express itself and do not know what it's doing, you should understand that maybe this is not the right time to go ahead. If the person is silent, freezes, a freezing doesn't mean yes. It could be that the person is scared of you. It could be a context where, you always know if the circumstances also affects the person's choice or not. So I would say in the most of the cases, or almost all the cases, and if you do not know, then you should take a few steps backwards.
And was there any consultation with activists and organizations working on gender-based violence while you were working on the draft of this text?
Yes. For me, it's always important to ensure to have a dialogue with those who knows the issues. I mean, as the legislators, we are passionate about different topics, different issues, due to different reasons, but it doesn't mean that we are sitting in all the expertise, and therefore it's important for us to gather experts around us. So I have been meeting police officers. I have met with other people from the judicial system. I have met with civil society organizations who are working with these kind of issues. I have been working, especially also, had been in dialogue with women's organizations who are experts on this field. So I have met representatives and people from a wide range of the society who are working on these topics.
And in the report, you also I found it really interesting, you call member states to ensure survivors to have full access to medical care and services, and that professionals who are likely to come into contact with rape victims receive mandatory and regular courses. So I wanted to ask you if in the experience that you gain, it is something that it's missing in member states.
I think we need to start from an early age, because men's violence against women starts always with boys, or at an early age with boys' violence against girls. So we need to ensure that we have consent-based culture within the society. Dialogue from an early age, but then also, and we need to ensure that those who are working with in the judiciary understand also the culture, consent-based culture mentality. Also have that questions about how short the dress was, or if you really said no, and those kind of things do not always appear, but that the questions also is being turned to the perpetrators. How did you ensure that the person said yes? Because those questions that we see today in, for example, in courts, are almost reaching to an extent of victim blaming, where the woman is being questioned if she really clearly said it in a way that the other person would understand. I mean, if you say no, or if you don't say anything, then the other person have a responsibility to ensure that you really said yes. I will take an example. If someone goes into your apartment, steals your, without your consent, and steals your TV, the question will not be if you really said, no, don't take my TV, or you said, yes, please take my TV. The question that would appear is if he got, or she, or that person got the permission to take the TV. But here, the question is always to the woman, did you really say no or show that you didn't want to? Instead of to the perpetrator, did you ensure that you really got a yes? So in today's Europe, in some member states, a TV is more worth than a woman's body. Your wallet, if somebody takes it, the person would need to show that and explain that he or she had a consent from you to take your wallet and take your money. So, I mean, when we compare them, things have more value than a woman's body today.
Okay, so you think like in member states, this kind of medical service or courses that can train professionals are still missing?
They are very much lacking in most of the member states, even those member states, I would say, who has consent-based rape legislations, because it's a mentality change also, that you should not only search for bruises and search for apparent consequences of when fighting back, because rape or resistance look different. Some people who are victims and survivors of this kind of heinous violence are not able to resist in a physical way. They shut down, or they get scared. And that you are being treated in a way that you get scared, you should not get blamed for. The person who scares you, who is the perpetrator, is the one that should be scared of the consequences.
And regarding this, what countries do you think have the most advanced legislation, and what are the countries with the less advanced legislation in Europe?
Well, there are several countries who has advanced legislation. I mean, Spain, Sweden, Denmark are a few of the countries who has consent-based rape legislations, and then if I remember it correctly, countries as Czech Republic, for example, do not have any consent-based rape legislation, not Hungary either. A country that is in between is Germany. Germany has a no means no legislation, which means that you should say no. But for us, what is important is that, once again, that an absent of a no doesn't mean yes automatically, but an absent of yes is a no, should be seen as a no.
And this text was approved by a large majority of the European Parliament, but still there were 160 MEPs that were against it. So I wanted to ask you, why do you think it is so difficult to agree on what constitutes rape and the best way to protect the victims? Of course, I'm asking this, let's say, politics aside, because I'm sure politics play a role, but do you think there are legitimate reasons why people can be divided on such an important issues where we all think that everyone should agree on it?
Unfortunately, if we look at how it looks and who is the one who are voting in favor, it was mainly, or almost, not everybody, almost exclusive, the far right MEPs. And I mean, I hear what they say in the debate. They claim that that this kind of heinous violence only comes from people, men who have the same color as me or the same background, so people with migrant background. They claim that sexual relationship in marriages is a private and family matter, etc., etc. And none of those arguments that they are putting forward are actually true, because the perpetrators do not have a certain color or certain background or certain class. They come from the whole range of the society. The crimes do not only happen in one area, it happens in all across the areas, on streets and squares, at homes, but mainly at home. And then if you refuse to understand that violence can occur also, different violence between in a relationship, I mean, then you are closing your eyes for the lives that those women who are victims are actually living, and you are taking the perpetrator's side. So for me, when I look at the arguments that they have against these legislations, I do not see any truth or validity in the content.
So you think it's only for political reasons, or?
I think it's very political, because they also, another argument that they use is it's not all men are not rapists, and nobody's saying all men are rapists. But if we look at the figures, all men are not rapists, but those who are committing it are almost always men. And even that they close their eyes on. It's not about blaming men, it's about pointing out that the majority, almost everyone, are men who are committing it. And if we don't want to see the situation as it is, then we cannot either ensure that legislations are proper enough to meet the reality. Both legislation, but of course other societal interventions. For example, culture-based dialogue on a young age. It's not only with girls that this discussion needs to be taken, it's with boys, that pushing a girl doesn't mean love. I mean, I remember when I was much younger, when I was a child, when there was a fight between a girl and a boy, the teachers were dismissing it as, oh, he's so in love with her and that's why he doesn't know how to show love. Yeah, but when that happens, we should be clear that that's not how you show love, and describe that you show love through hugging, through being, nice, through being kind, through ensuring that the person in front of you are always agreeing with what you also want before you take any steps.
And I was speaking with someone working for one of the right-wing political groups, and he was saying that one of the, of course, dismissed some of the arguments that were brought up as not really relevant even by that side, but said that one of the real concern is that by shifting the focus from a physical to a psychological aspect in the definition of rape, this would then require during a trial a stronger psychological assessment, which will place, this person was saying, the alleged victim in a very difficult positions and cause them even more trauma, because of course this person was telling me the defense will try to assess psychologically whether the person gave his consent or not, and the assessment made by the defense of an alleged rapist will not be nice on the victim. And so this person was saying that maybe this change in the legislation will cause even more trauma to the victim. What do you reply to that? What's your opinion on this argument?
I think they're totally crap, because when you work with those who actually are experts, and with women's organizations, and sometimes it's organizations where women who have experience from this kind of heinous violence are organized in, they all say as as those that I at least have met are saying the same things, that today's legislations that remains in some countries are a burden for women, are victim blaming, leads to women not daring even to report. I mean, most of women and girls do not even report because they will be laughed at, their cases will be closed down, or they will get question after question after question about what did you wear, did you really say no, how did you say no, why don't you have bruises, why aren't you bleeding, etc., etc. So I mean, if we look at the reality, the arguments that he's using are from another planet. For me, it's important to talk to those who knows the issue, those who have experienced it. And we also need to look at the figures. And the reality is unfortunately as it is. And to create an alternative reality just to strengthen your arguments like this other colleague is doing, I mean, it's not fair to all those who have survived. And neither for all those who unfortunately have their lives deprived from them.
And I want to, sorry, I have so many questions. I want to bring up another quote from an Italian MEP from Incir, who's called Elena Donazzan.
Okay.
I don't know if you know her.
I know, yes.
And, and she argued that similarly, that the shift from a dissent-based definition to a consent-based definition would damage the victim, and she says that given, I quote exactly, given the woman's denial, it will be more difficult for the alleged rapist to mount a defense in court, as it will be a clear act that it is easier to prove. She's saying that if there is a dissent-based definition helps the victim because it's easier to prove. So I think that the point it is.
But what they don't understand is that they need to the court needs to take into account different, of course, perspectives and the different circumstances. If you have bruise, if you have all of that, that's the most apparent ones. The most that shows directly, but the dimension that we want to add is also that it's not only through physical bruises and so on where that should only be taken into account, but there are other circumstances that should be, and other perspectives also that should be to be taken account. So to be honest, I really don't see their perspectives. I don't really understand their arguments.
From that quote, I wanted, the question was, how in practice do you think it is possible to prove the lack of consent when it is not evident physically? I think that was something that we can try to get from that that quote. Sorry.
Well, in Sweden, we had there was an evaluation that was published just a couple of weeks ago. The evaluation of our consent-based rape legislation that was put in place 2018. What that evaluation says is that there are still problems with proof collections, fast proof collections, which leads to some cases still being put aside and closed down. They haven't seen the problem which the far right MEPs here in the parliament says, but rather that the expectations from the legislations due to the lack of improvement of, among others, proof collections has not been realized. I mean, has not been, we don't see those improvement yet in the way that we expected to see. But of course, it's not just, I mean, the far right wants to portray it as innocent people will be put in jail because they will be blamed for something. It's not, the legislation doesn't mean that someone can just blame you and you will have the responsibility to show that you are innocent. I mean, the presumption of innocence still is there. No change in that. Burden of proof, still there. But the person who is accusing will still need to show that the person actually never said no. So there are just additional perspectives that will be taken into account for the court when they are deciding on what they believe in after the court procedure. In addition to that, some questions, some perspectives that were taken into account previously belongs to the dustbin of history, as what is the relevance of how short my skirt was or what I wear in a rape case. The length of my skirt is not relevant if I said yes or no, or if I pushed back or didn't do it.
Yeah, of course. But there was an interesting fact that when I read the report about, as you mentioned before, the freeze response or the phone response, I think that's, and how, of course, they don't imply consent because there is all a psychological aspect. But still, I didn't get from your answer how, if it's in a trial, someone says, yes, I said no, or like I didn't want to, and the other person says, no, she gave me the consent. Do you see possible to prove it when it's about two persons arguing a yes or no, and there is not like physical evidence that you can collect? Let's say there are, like, in your experience on the study that you did, like, is it possible to prove it in court?
Well, I mean, if it's possible to prove or that you got a yes to take TV, then you should be able to prove the other also. Or, I mean, this is not the only case where there needs to be a consent for you to take a certain action. And that's not actually, when you look at those countries who has implemented it, this is not, as far as I know, the biggest discussion. I mean, the court still needs to take into account more than just what a person says. There are other kind of proofs, you know, and circumstantial proofs also that could be important in making the final decision on the judgment. So it's not just, it's not words against words. It's about proof, and circumstances proof should also be an important dimension, or an additional dimension to other kinds of physical proofs.
And one final question. You approved the report, and I wanted to ask you, what are the next steps? What do you expect?
Well, what is important right now is that the EU Commission, the European Union Commission, put forward a proposal on this matter. They have done it once before as part of the part of the directive on domestic violence and violence against women last mandate. So the experience is there, and therefore it should also go promptly for them to actually put forward a proposal. So it's just take out what was proposed the last time, take a look at it, how can it be improved, put it forward so that we in both legislative bodies, the European Parliament and the Council, where the member states are, can start the work.
Okay. And do you think they are gonna proceed in that sense?
I'm not that, well, I hope. I'm hopeful, that I can say. I'm hopeful. But because there is will among especially those who are working with these topics. But at the same time, there is this dimension of a development in the member states in the last years due to horrific incidents. So that's also an additional thing that I think, for me, at least leads to me believing that Commission is taking the development in the member states into account. And then there is a third one, and that is that there is another legislation right now being addressed and handled in the Parliament and in the Council, and that is a legislation on child sexual abuse. And it's a criminal law legislation. Within that, what I've heard now is that also the Council, as we already in the Parliament have taken our decision on it, but in both the proposals include a consent-based rape legislation, but that is for those who are in the minors, but still in a sexual consent age. So there are a few perspectives that when I think about them, I believe that those could actually be indications on that things can start moving.